The next is, all right, so now you have a plan, you have your priorities, you got the buy-in, you've got some sort of initial set of people. How do you implement this? So the first thing that is important is it's helpful to create or or to facilitate the creation of an initial set of content. Right? So let's say that you're working on glossary. You don't want to go ask a bunch of stewards to write some business definitions if you have none in there right now, because they won't have any good examples. So you want to define sort of the attributes in your coding standards. So what are our security classifications? What are our list of functional areas, or however you want to think, the sort of drop-down selections that people are going to make. And then try to reach what I call a content tipping point, to get in, import existing content, create some high priority, curate some high priority like reports or whatever, to generate a certain amount of content that when you're asking other people to come in and author or review things, that they're not staring at an empty slate, that they've got enough content there that they feel like that they're contributing to something that is already great instead of starting from scratch. And that's important. And that's a really important job of like within this first 6 months to a year, of making sure that you're seeding enough good example content in there for people to work off. As part of that, that'll create sort of examples and templates for people to look at, and you can identify like, here's some good examples of how we want to document this stuff. And then lastly here for content is to facilitate automation. So there's content that requires sort of curation and human input. And there's other content that you can technically automate in terms of like just pulling in a data model or pulling in a list of reports or something like that. And if you can get that kind of automated either one time or even better on an ongoing synchronization, that's great. And that helps you to get that content tipping point for people to curate information. Next thing is training your stewards and other data governance participants. So training in the goals and the processes and the tools. So notice I put this very first, training in the goals. So that helps build buy-in amongst the people who are doing this, both your stewards and your general consumers and requesters and those other people that we've discussed. If they understand why you're doing this, they're more apt to participate. Support their activity by support the stewards through the approval review process and subject matter expertise and input. So give them whatever they need to make sure that they can do their job. And then training the broader community on how to do these sort of points of entry for new requests or questions or new, submitting new content in. And then set goals and establish standards for responses. So maybe you say, hey, if someone submitted a data request for a new report, we want to have that sort of spec'd out and documented within 3 days or something. It's something that you can define and include it and communicate to everyone, and then measure that effectively. One of the ways that you can help with training is to review the content of the new stewards. And by the way, I'm not always talking about a single individual here. Like, this is ideally a group of an oversight group. However, to be fair, like, I don't think it's useful to have this group be enormous, right? Because these people have to be very much your champions and bought in. So it's probably like 4 to 6 people, maybe the size of your organization might be bigger, who are taking this leadership and oversight role. But one thing you can do is to facilitate supportive and constructive feedback on the activity that the new stewards are doing. So if people are writing definitions, if they're creating data quality rules, if they're building report specs, if they're assigning policy attributes, whatever these things might be, to give either an automated method or a way for people to request like kind of an oversight review of what they've done to make sure it looks fine, and then give them feedback. The other thing is to train stewards to bring in collaborators. So one of the things we talked about with assigning resources is that, and we talked about this in the data steward session, is that it's perfectly fine and normal for you not to have a steward in every possible content and activity who is bought in and ready to be a data steward. But if there is for instance, a data quality issue with the HR payroll system and you don't have a steward or a person already, how do you have a way to kind of pull in a collaborator? Find that right person and pull them in. And that's a good, as we'll talk about in a minute, that's a good role for the oversight group to be. But also you can train your people to say, the stewards to say that if they're stuck, if they have something they don't know, that it's perfectly fine to either try to find a subject matter expert and pull them in to help them, or to request support from the oversight group, like if they don't know what they're doing. So lastly, from this implement and training standpoint, that it's really powerful if you want to kind of set up the oversight group to serve as acting stewards. So particularly at the beginning, you're going to have a bunch of vacancies essentially in the stewardship workflows, and kind of by design or by priority. And one way that you can do that is you can assign the oversight group to the workflows, or you can create governance, specific stewardship roles, and assign the members of the oversight group to those stewardship roles, so that things get routed to you, so nothing's falling through the cracks. And then it's your job to either go ahead and take action and act as proxy, or to go recruit and enlist a just-in-time subject matter expert. And one thing that happens with that is, if you're doing that, that's a good way to kind of build buy-in and recruit them to become new stewards and to fill those roles. But that's an important act to play, is essentially to be the to be the acting steward for areas that are currently unfilled or non-committed.